Hey everyone, my name is Aziz. I'm one of the co-founders of StellaSwap. What is StellaSwap? StellaSwap is basically a hybrid DEX. We're a DEX built on Moonbeam, and as of right now, we're the biggest DEX on Polkadot in terms of trade volume. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. All right, so yeah, StellaSwap, we're right now the largest DEX in terms of trade volume across Polkadot. Happy to share. Then I'm going to walk you across the importance of XCM in facilitating cross-chain trading across Polkadot, both externally across networks as well as internally via XCM. So just an extension of the introduction. So far, since the start, we've had over $1 billion of trading volume, and our daily trading volume amounts to anywhere between 1 million to 3 million, and basically 90% of trade volume on Moonbeam, which is an EVM parachain, one of the top parachains on Polkadot. Right now, 90% of trades on Moonbeam is routed through us. Right, so we are extremely proud of the fact that we've managed such a high market share because obviously with the help of the community grants on Moonbeam as well as the support across all protocols, we've grown to be the largest DEX. The most important, what's our vision, right? The main thing for us is, the main vision is basically being the shelling point of Polkadot. The cool technology behind Polkadot's tech stack, which is XCM, right? Cross-consensus messaging that allows parachains or systems to talk to one another. So that's very important. That sort of like allows us to actualize the shelling point vision, because then we can list assets across other parachains on Moonbeam, on StellaSwap, right? And users can have access to all native assets across Polkadot via XCM. So that's very important for us to facilitate. And I'll go in depth about how we support a lot of these native parachain projects. So yeah, as I said earlier, 75% of volume across Polkadot is routed through StellaSwap across our 3 AMMs. So before I move on any further, I think it's important to set the sort of like expectations, right? Or the how things work in DeFi. Unfortunately, in DeFi, as in you can see the flow of unsustainable yields, right? Because in order to attract people, you've seen it, right? In order to attract TVL, attract users, it's always an APR game, albeit at the start, right? So a huge amount of incentives in terms of ecosystem grants, in terms of emissions from the native DEX, like our tokens, needs to be there to attract liquidity. And liquidity is the lifeblood of any exchange, right? With liquidity, with sufficient market depth, price discovery happens where the price of the assets on the exchanges are fair value. If not, if there's very little liquidity, obviously there's high slippage, high cost of trading, and that is detrimental to any DEX, right? It's unusable, right? Therefore, since liquidity is the lifeblood of the exchange, we have to attract liquidity. And in DeFi, you attract liquidity with APRs, right? Now, attracting APRs is something, if you just focus on emissions, right? It is unsustainable, right? And therefore, the paradigm shift in terms of thinking, how can we attract liquidity in a sustainable way? And that is via organic APRs. And what is organic APRs? Organic APRs are APRs or yields which are generated through trade fees, right? Every trade that you do on a DEX, there's a fee involved, right? 0.3%, or on stable swaps, 0.01%. Right? So those fees are basically will be distributed to those who stake, right? Because they need to be incentivized for providing liquidity, right? So focusing on how do we sort of like cultivate trade fee APR is our top priority, And therefore, why I said at the beginning we were a hybrid AMM is because under the hood we have 3 AMMs on StellaSwap, starting with the normal AMM, and we also have a stable AMM, right, just like Curve, right? And the latest addition at the start of this year is that we worked with Algebra to deploy a concentrated liquidity AMM. This is vital to our survival, and that's why the results have shown that we're the top trading venue, right? Because we realized the need for us to continue operating in a sustainable way and not just, rely on ecosystem grants to prop us. And therefore, concentrated liquidity we transited to concentrated liquidity AMMs. Now, in a nutshell, concentrated liquidity aims to be at the efficiency level of a central centralized exchange order book system, basically like Binance, right? You see all the buy-sell orders. If you manifest all those orders into a chart, it's going to be a bell shape, where the most of the liquidity is at or near the market price of an asset. So concentrated liquidity aims to do just that. Instead of liquidity across 0 to infinity, right, it's concentrated around market price. And that's why it's extremely efficient, right? And because of that, we benefit from the efficiency gains, right? Lower TVL required for the same level of slippage, much lower TVL. So for example, just an example, right? Previously in our standard AMM, versus concentrated liquidity AMM, we needed 20 million of a standard AMM liquidity to have the same slippage as a pool of 1 million in Pulsar, concentrated liquidity AMM. Same slippage, but Pulsar just requires 1 million, but standard AMM requires 20 million. So you can see us winning away from, needing ecosystem grants or pushing our tokens to attract 20 million when we only need 1 million. So that's sustainable and organic. Now, but it creates an issue. We have 3 AMMs. Uniswap, Curve, they all have their own AMMs separately, right? How do we trade route across those 3 silos AMM? So what we had to work on was create a hybrid router, a universal router of sorts, where each AMM talks to one another and we can route the best, most efficient path of trading across the 3 AMMs. Right? So if you want, for example, Frax, right, and you have DOT. Right now, there is no DOT Frax pool. So a route needs to happen through our router, which goes to .USDC or .USDT and then USDT Frax, right? So we've built that hybrid routers to facilitate the connection between all three AMMs, which is a really great sort of like step up, because previously users needed to understand the flows to trade, right? So if you wanted Frax with DOT, when there's no direct liquidity pool, your slippage is going to be 90%. So you need to know on the back of your mind, okay, I need to route to this pool and then that pool. But now with the hybrid router, everything is automated, right? So it's all simplified and you get the most efficient price. The cool thing also as well about, which is here, right? And this you can see the router in action, where it routes you from USDT to Glimmer. It routes to a stable AMM, and it routes to a Pulse, our concentrated liquidity AMM Pulsar. Right, so this is in action. Now, one cool thing about our hybrid router is that we also use Permit 2, which is Uniswap's sort of like 3 months ago, they launched Permit 2, which is a great innovation to streamline user experience and strengthen security in terms of token approval. So for example, in this context, when there's various AMMs, means various swaps, therefore various transactions. But with Permit 2, all you have to do is to confirm and approve one transaction, and all this on the back end will just execute. So that level of sort of abstraction in terms of simplicity was afforded via the integration of Permit 2, and given that it improves security through two things, right, which is time-bound approvals and time-bound approvals and one-time signatures, right? So that really, I mean, things like this, right, what we try to do is basically look at areas within the user journey to really simplify, because you need to simplify DeFi. And because of that, because of transition to concentrated liquidity and router, what it allows us to do is to have the lowest slippage in the market. So if you want any native native assets on Polkadot to trade in a decentralized manner, the best prices that you're going to get is on StellaSwap, right? Because with very low slippage, right? Concentrated liquidity. And we're basically one of the DEXs with the highest concentration of .native assets across where native assets in other parachains, Interlace, IBTC, Achilles assets, Centrifuge, Fala Network, right? It's all, there, right? That gives users choice, which is very important, right? And obviously high utilization. Efficiency means high utilization. On average, standard AMMs have a utilization rate of 5%, which means every $100,000 of TVL, there will be $5,000 of trade volume, right? But for Pulsar, concentrated liquidity, it ranges from 30% to 100%. Last 2 days, our most popular pair, which is USDC DOT, there was a 100% utilization rate. Right, because it was extremely popular, and because of its popularity, high trade fees. Because of high trade fees, high APRs, and therefore people stake. So it's a virtuous cycle. Pretty sure you guys know about XCM already, and how this is important, right? In the high level, in how we operate, right? Being the Shelling point of Polkadot requires us to establish the infrastructure to facilitate the easiest way for capital inflows. What that means is that for the user to come to Moonbeam or to StellaSwap or to Polkadot, right, it must be very easy for them to transfer their assets, right? And not only that, not only fostering capital inflows easily, but you also have to have a wide range of assets, right? And we want to showcase all this cool stuff on Polkadot, right, and their assets, and therefore, having a wide array of assets gives users a lot of choice for them to pick, right? And that selection of menu of DOT assets is achieved through XCM, right? Now, there's two main ways of executing this in terms of using XCM to have assets on StellaSwap, right? The first way, which is the easiest way, is that they list on StellaSwap. Right, so the assets via XCM go to StellaSwap, like Interlace IBTC, for example, go in StellaSwap or Kela USD, right? Then users can access those. But the next step in terms of the version 2 of utilizing XCM to facilitate trade flows, right, would be to automatically, on the back end, right? Imagine a user it's on StellaSwap, which is on Moonbeam, right? They want A-star on A-star. Perhaps that's the best route, right? Because in A-star's DEX is the most liquid. So V2 would require a user that wants A-star natively to A-star to have for us to build an aggregator so that we can convert, for example, whatever native assets on Moonbeam and then XCM that to A-star to get A-star. So that is the two stages. We're currently at stage 1. Stage 1 has its benefits, of course, because we can, as in right now, Polkadot's liquidity across parachains are quite thin, right? And therefore, stage 1 works well at this point. Once we're at a level of scale with Polkadot's liquidity deepening up, then obviously Layer 2 is in effect. exchange swaps that you see at the top, right, that connects external networks to StellaSwap. I think this is extremely cool because that manifests in our cross-chain swaps that we've partnered with Squid and Xla. I mean, this is one of those things that I feel very strongly for because that simplifies DeFi. And anything that simplifies DeFi is a step in the right direction, right? This has, how this works is that whatever tokens that you have on your native, for example, Ethereum or EVEX or Polygon, you can do a swap to get Glimmer on Moonbeam without the need for bridging, requiring gas fees, blah, blah, blah. Straight up one-click swap, that's it. So in fact, this has been tremendously popular to a degree where more transactions right now in terms of users go for cross-chain swaps rather than bridge to Moonbeam. And this is something that we're really proud of to really sort of like change the behaviors of the users in a way that is more simple, right? So this is something that we're really, really proud of, and it's basically, you can look at our website at the swap. There's a toggle there for cross-chain swaps. You can look, fees are very low, and it's relatively fast, especially if you come to Moonbeam. Within a minute, you get finality. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, if you want to go to Ethereum on Moonbeam, it's going to take like half an hour, right? Because Ethereum is very slow and expensive. So might as well you sort of like trade stuff on Polkadot. So 2 case studies that I wanted to share in terms of them listing on StellaSwap due to the efficiencies of Pulsar would be Intel's IBTC, which was launched a month ago. We sort of like bootstrap this right together with very limited emissions, and the volumes relative to the liquidity is like 18%, right? So that is something which is very important to bootstrap liquidity across native dot assets and not rely exclusively on emissions. So is DAM's D20, DAM Finance stablecoin, which we've managed to also bootstrap with like 20% of utilization rate, at the start. Those are examples of how we sort of like give exposure and bootstrap liquidity for projects on Moonbeam. And and in order to facilitate capital inflows, an extension of cross-chain swaps is fiat on-ramps, right? And ensuring that there's sufficient CX rails to allow users to bridge whatever assets or send value to Moonbeam. And these are the examples of partners that we've worked with to enable those kind of payment gateways to connect and for them to send value effortlessly. One more cool thing that we're also working on, which is like 90% done, is redefining gasless. I mean, we currently have 2 sort of like things, which is swap for gas and faucet. We're going to retire them in favor of creating a gasless experience. Imagine coming to Moonbeam without requiring Glimmer to trade, right? So you have USDT from Ethereum, and then you trade USDT to any tokens on StellaSwap, right, without gas. Because on the back end, what we do is that we convert for you, and then it deducts from your USDT, for example, right? So again, one of our main sort of like principles is simplification. And gas has been a main bummer because imagine explaining to your parents that, in order to do DeFi, you have to have gas. That is something that we really want to abstract across the board. And 2 things which are coming up, which is extremely exciting, in order to create more stickiness across our protocols, right? Within the next month, we're going to launch an ideal launchpad, which is an extension to Moonbeam's most recent hackathons. 10 selected winners. We're going to work with them to launch the tokens, through our ideal platform, through an auction system, which we are working with GBM. And also liquid staking Glimmer, which has been pending for 6 months or 8 months. But right now, we're hot in the hills of development, and that is what you can expect from us to foster more utility across the ecosystem. So time is up. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you have any questions, just catch me outside. I'll just be roaming around. Thanks, everyone.